Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the rugged, fiery world of medieval craftsmanship. Picture yourself waking up to the clang of metal against metal and the acrid scent of burning coal in the air. No soft feather beds here. Your bed is a hard slab of wood, your blanket little more than a threadbare piece of wool. You rise, stiff and sore, from a night spent on a wooden floor. Your hands are already calloused from the work ahead, and the day's grind is waiting for you. This is the life of a medieval blacksmith, where survival depends not only on your physical strength, but on your ability to endure grueling hours in the heat, hammering metal and shaping the future of weapons, tools, and trade. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm curious, where are you watching from tonight, and what time is it there? I'd love to see how far we're reaching across the globe now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As the sun barely peeks over the horizon, you make your way to the forge of the heart of your life's work. The walls of the shop are blackened by soot, and the air is thick with smoke. But this is home. It's here that you'll spend your days bent over the anvil, shaping the future with nothing but your hands, your tools, and a fiery furnace that feels like a beast demanding your attention. As a blacksmith, you don't just make objects, you shape the world around you, from horseshoes to swords, tools, and even the weapons that kingdoms depend on. The forge itself is a beast of its own, a constant source of heat and danger. You know the space well. The roaring furnace, a bubbling cauldron of fire and ash that you must tend to day and night. It's where you heat the metal, making it malleable before the real work begins. The heat feels unbearable, but there's no escaping it. If the furnace is down, you can't work, and without the work, there's no food. So you feed the fire, stoke it with the charred remains of wood, and get the temperature just right to start your day's work. The blacksmith's life is defined by heat, hammer, and fire. You can already feel the sweat beading on your brow as you grab your hammer, the heavy tool that's been in your hand for years. It's worn, the handle's smooth where you've gripped it over countless hours. Your muscles ache from the repetition, but you don't stop. You strike the heated metal on the anvil, the clang of metal against metal reverberating through the air. With each strike, you feel your own energy pour into the metal, shaping it into something useful. Whether it's a blade or a spike, the object forms under your skillful hands. The repetitive motions of the job have taken their toll. Your body is a patchwork of scars, burns, and blisters from years spent in the furnace's heat. Yet, this is your life. It's what you do. You've built the muscles needed for it, but that doesn't make it easier. Every day is a battle against exhaustion, the scorching heat, and the physical toll of working with metals that could burn you at any moment. But there's no time to worry about it. There's too much work to do. Every piece you create is another piece of the puzzle that keeps the kingdom running. A blacksmith like you is indispensable, and that makes the pain worth it. Historians still argue whether the blacksmith's life was as brutally exhausting as it seemed, or whether it was simply the reality of the time. Some believe that the physical toll was accepted as part of life in the medieval world built on hard labor and self-sufficiency. Others argue that the job could have been more fulfilling in its own way, given the high regard people had for blacksmiths and the vital role they played in the community. Either way, the life of a medieval blacksmith was a tough one, a gritty, demanding existence spent in the shadow of the fire. Now, let's step inside the forge, where the air is thick with smoke, and the rhythmic clang of metal against metal fills the air. The atmosphere here is intense. The heat from the furnace feels like a living thing, ready to swallow you whole. The floor is streaked with soot, and the smell of burning coal and charred metal hangs heavy in the air. Your face is covered in a fine layer of sweat and ash, And your hands, rough from years of labor, feel like extensions of the tools you use. The blacksmith shop is where the magic happens, where fire and strength meet to create something. Both practical and beautiful. The furnace is your first stop of the day. You open the firebox, feeding it more fuel to keep the temperature high enough to work. The sound of the crackling flames fills the space, almost like a living creature begging for attention. You adjust the airflow, trying to get the flames just right. Too hot, and you'll burn the metal. Too cold, and it won't be malleable enough. As you work, you can feel the heat pressing in on you, the sweat running down your back as the forge's temperature rises. It's like being inside the heart of a dragon, hot, unforgiving, and constantly threatening to consume you if you're not careful. Historians still argue whether the blacksmith's life in the forge was as terrifying as it seemed, or whether the heat was something medieval workers simply adapted to over time. Some suggest that the constant exposure to the forge's intense heat could have led to health issues, such as chronic fatigue or even heat stroke, while others believe that blacksmiths became so used to it that they hardly noticed the discomfort. Either way, it's clear that working in a medieval forge wasn't just a job, it was a test of endurance. You move to the anvil, your workhorse, and pull out a glowing piece of metal from the furnace. The moment it touches the surface, it hisses, the intense heat sizzling as the molten metal begins to cool. The smell of the heated metal is sharp and metallic, but it's familiar now, just another part of the blacksmith's world. You pick up your hammer, heavy, worn from years of use, and begin to shape the metal with rhythmic strikes. The clang of hammer on metal echoes through the shop, creating a melody of hard work and perseverance. Each strike is a chance to shape not just the metal, but your future. You're shaping tools, weapons, and even the foundation of civilization itself with each strike. The hammering doesn't stop. Strike, bend, shape. Your body moves automatically, a well-practiced rhythm that's as natural as breathing. You lift the hammer, bringing it down with precision and force, shaping the steel into something that will soon be useful to someone: a sword, a hoe, a nail. The work is constant, exhausting, but it has a rhythm to it. With every hammer blow, you feel yourself getting a little closer to the goal. Whether it's finishing a sword or simply getting through the day, historians still debate whether blacksmiths were physically stronger than most medieval laborers due to the sheer physicality of their work. Some argue that the repetitive motion of striking metal could have made them incredibly strong, while others suggest that the job was more about endurance than strength. Either way, it's clear that the blacksmith's body was shaped by the deep work. Those muscles weren't just from lifting, they were forged by the hammer, the fire, and the unrelenting demands of the trade. As you continue hammering away at the glowing metal, sweat pours down your face, stinging your eyes. But you don't stop. There's no time for that. The metal must be shaped, and if you stop now, you risk losing the heat, the momentum. Each piece you make is a small victory over the elements, over time itself. It's your way of defying the odds, proving that despite the heat, the strain, and the exhaustion, you can still craft something useful, important, and durable. In the medieval blacksmith's world, tools were everything. Without them, there could be no craft, no weapons, no tools for survival. Your tools are your companions, worn down over years of work, but still vital to your trade. The hammer, the tongs, the anvil, each one has a distinct purpose, and each piece of equipment plays its part in the shaping of metal. They are your lifeline to your craft, and as you work, you can't help but marvel at the age-old tools that are passed down from generation to generation. The hammer in your hand is a constant companion, one that has molded countless pieces of metal throughout the years. It's heavy, but you've become used to its weight. The steel head glints in the light of the forge as you bring it down with force on the metal. The handle is smooth where your hand has gripped it, worn down over time, but still strong. Every strike of the hammer sends a jolt through your arms, your body reminding you of the toll this work takes on you. But there's no room for weakness. You can't stop. The metal won't shape itself. Historians still debate whether medieval blacksmiths had a deeper connection to their tools and the work they did, or whether it was simply a job like any other. Some suggest that tools were viewed as sacred extensions of the craft, treated with reverence, while others believe that blacksmiths saw them merely as functional objects designed for efficiency. Either way, the tools were essential, and their condition was a testament to the blacksmith's skill and dedication. Your tongs are another tool that plays a crucial role in your daily work. They are used to hold the red-hot metal, to manipulate it as it glows in the furnace's flames, to pull it from the fire and onto the anvil. The tongs are heavy and long, designed to give you distance from the heat, but your grip must be steady, or the metal could slip, causing injury or ruining the work. Every time you lift a piece of metal, the tongs become an extension of your hand, guiding the molten material into shape with a precision that only years of practice can provide. Historians still argue whether medieval blacksmiths developed a unique bond with their tools, or if the job was purely about practicality. Some believe that the tongs, hammer, and anvil were treated with a level of respect akin to the sacredness of a priest's tools, as they were seen as essential for transforming raw material into something of value. Others suggest that, in the tough and labor-intensive world of the medieval blacksmith, the tools were simply part of the daily grind, no more special than a plow or scythe. Either way, these tools were vital to your craft, and their care was essential to the survival of your trade. After a long day of work, the tools are just as worn as you are. The hammerhead has become dull from countless strikes. The tongs have bent ever so slightly under the pressure of heating metal. The anvil, too, shows signs of wear, small dents and scratches that have appeared over the years, each one a mark of a job well done. Every time you use these tools, you feel the history of the trade in your hands, a tradition that goes back centuries, shaping the future of your craft and your community. Historians still argue whether the blacksmith's tools were simply tools of labor, or whether they were seen as tools of creation. Some suggest that medieval blacksmiths saw their tools as instruments that connected them to the divine, as they forged the tools and weapons that were used in battle, defense, and the sustenance of their people. Others believe that the tools were purely functional, designed to maximize productivity without any mystical attachment. Either way, the blacksmith's tools were essential to the work, and their care ensured that the craft could continue to thrive as the day winds down. You look over your tools, feeling the weight of your work and the history embedded in each piece. The hammer, the tongs, the anvil have been your companions in the forge, and though they are battered and worn, they still serve you well. Tomorrow, you'll pick them up again, just as you have every day for years, continuing the cycle of work, craft, and creation. You know these tools better than you know yourself, and that's how it's always been. It's the nature of the blacksmiths, life-steady, unyielding, and built on the constant hum of the forge. As you continue your work in the forge, the heat and the rhythmic sound of hammer striking metal become as much a part of your existence as breathing. There is little rest, and the work is never-ending. Your body aches from the constant labor, but you push through because there's no choice. The metal waits for no one. Each day, you forge tools, weapons, and implements, but they aren't just things you create. They are essential pieces of the world, integral to the survival of your village, your kingdom, and the people you serve. Every strike of the hammer echoes in your ears, vibrating through your bones as you shape another sword, another plow, another horseshoe. The anvil feels like an extension of your own body, responding to each blow with resistance or yield as the metal takes form. The heat from the furnace is a constant companion, radiating from every corner of the shop, but it's the coolness of the outside world that feels like a luxury. Yet, there is no escape from this world, this cycle of work, forge, and metal. It is the blacksmith's life, the endless toil of shaping the world with hammer and fire. Historians still argue whether the medieval blacksmith's life was as exhausting as it seems, or whether it was more about the sense of craftsmanship and artistry involved. Some suggest that the sheer physical toll of the work made the craft a brutal experience, while others believe that blacksmiths were considered masters of their art and enjoyed a sense of pride in their workmanship. Either way, the toll of the constant labor on the body was undeniable, and the work was relentless. The work of a blacksmith wasn't just about forging objects. It was about creating the things that kept the world turning. You are not just a craftsman. You are a creator, a molder of destiny. Every sword you forge may one day be used in battle. Every plow could be the key to a successful harvest. And every nail is a tiny part of a house, a barn, a bridge. The work you do has a purpose beyond the workshop. You are part of something much bigger than yourself, part of a world that depends on your hands, your skill, and your endurance. But the reality of your world is brutal. The tools you use are heavy, their weight pulling on your body. The heat from the forge is constant, and your skin is marked by the scars of your labor. The blacksmith's shop is a place of fire and steel, where every movement is part of a cycle that repeats day after day. The work is never over. Even when the sun sets, your body aches, and the world outside seems to pause for a moment. The forge still burns. You must keep the fire alive, feeding the furnace so it doesn't go cold overnight. If the fire goes out, you'll be unable to work, and if you can't work, you don't eat. There is no time for rest or weakness in this life. Historians still debate whether the mental strain of working as a blacksmith was just as great as the physical toll. Some argue that the constant battle with the elements, the repetitive labor, and the lack of rest could have led to mental exhaustion and burnout, while others believe that the mental satisfaction of creating something useful from raw materials was worth the effort. Either way, the blacksmith's life was not just one of physical labor, it was a life of resilience, both physical and mental. At the end of the day, as you step back from the forge, you're covered in a fine layer of ash and sweat, your muscles sore from the hammering, your hands calloused from years of use. Yet, even as you wipe the sweat from your brow and take a long drink of water, you know that tomorrow will be another day of endless labor. The work never stops, and there is no rest for a blacksmith. Your life is bound to the forge, and it is this relentless cycle that keeps you going just as it is kept blacksmiths going for centuries. Historians still debate whether the blacksmith's life was fulfilling or simply tolerable. Given the intense physical and mental strain, some suggest that the work gave blacksmiths a sense of purpose and community, while others argue that it was simply a grind of survival. Either way, the blacksmith's endurance in the face of such hard work is a testament to the human spirit's ability to persist through the most challenging conditions. You stand before the furnace, eyes narrowed in the dim light, feeling the heat radiate as you prepare for another long day. The air in the workshop is thick with the smell of smoke, burning coal, and the metallic temps of freshly forged steel. Every piece you create, from a horseshoe to a sword, feels like a part of your very soul. The forge is your world, and each object that emerges from its flames is the product of your labor, your sweat, and the years of experience etched into every strike of the hammer. But even the smallest of failures in your craft could mean disaster, as the stakes in your world are always high after all. You are forging tools for a world at war. The medieval blacksmith's workload is never-ending. With the constant demand for weapons, tools, and everyday objects, the pressure is overwhelming. Each piece you craft is needed to ensure the survival and success of the community you serve. Every sword you forge could mean life or death for the warriors who wield it. A plow must be made to ensure the survival of the crops and the people who depend on them. And a horseshoe might seem insignificant, but it is essential for keeping the horses strong and able to carry goods and people across the land. There is little rest in the blacksmith's life, only constant work. Historians still argue whether the constant pressure to meet these demands shaped the blacksmith's mentality, or whether the work itself became a source of pride and fulfillment. Some suggest that the blacksmith's life was defined by the relentless need to create and provide a necessary but grueling existence. Others argue that despite the demands, there was a sense of purpose and community in the blacksmith's craft. Either way, the work was unyielding and required the resilience of an individual who could endure the toughest conditions. The blacksmith's shop is crowded with the sound of hammering and the heat of the forge. Customers come to you with their requests, whether it's a knife for hunting or a spade for digging, and you take each task seriously. Your reputation is built on the quality of your work, and any mistake could ruin your standing in the community. You work with precision, not only because you're skilled, but because your livelihood depends on the trust of others. If you fail, you risk alienating those who rely on your craft. But it's not just the pressure of your work that makes life as a blacksmith. Brutal, it's the physical toll it takes. After years of hammering, you feel your body giving in to the constant strain. Aches and pains settle into your joints, and the long hours spent bent over the forge leave your back stiff and your legs weak. There's no time to rest and no room for weakness. The furnace burns hot, and the hammer continues to swing, regardless of how exhausted you become. The body and mind must endure the heat, the noise, and the physical stress. Historians still debate whether the physical demands of the blacksmith's trade were simply the price of survival in medieval society, or whether the job's intensity and physicality were a reflection of the culture's values. Some suggest that blacksmiths were considered tough and resilient, respected for their ability to endure such grueling labor. Others argue that the constant strain on the body could have led to long-term health issues, making the blacksmiths' life more of a curse than a blessing. Either way, there's no denying that the blacksmith's trade came with its share of challenges, despite all the physical strain. There's still a sense of pride in the work. The mastery over fire and metal, the ability to turn raw material into something useful and lasting, brings a certain satisfaction. You know that the tools and weapons you craft are used by those who will defend their homes, feed their families, and build the future. It's this sense of purpose that drives you to keep going, even when your body protests, when the pain becomes too much, and when the exhaustion sets in. Every piece of work that leaves your shop is a testament to your skill, your perseverance, and your role in the greater world. Historians still argue whether the blacksmith's satisfaction was truly about pride in the work, or if it was merely a way to cope with the harsh realities of the job. Some suggest that the act of creating something with your own hands was a form of self-expression, while others argue that the satisfaction came simply from surviving in a world full of hardships. Either way, the blacksmith's life was both brutal and fulfilling, a mix of physicality, skill, and endurance that kept the fabric of medieval society intact. As the day moves on and the forge blazes hotter, you feel yourself becoming one with the heat. The steady rhythm of hammer strikes becomes almost meditative, the clanging sound reverberating through the walls, and you lose track of time. The work itself, while exhausting, takes on a life of its own. And there's something oddly satisfying about shaping raw metal into something useful. Each piece you make is a small triumph over the elements, the fire, the forge, and the weight of the day pressing down on you. But even as you craft these tools, weapons, and implements, you never forget the harshness of the world around you. The blacksmith shop is not a comfortable place. There's no luxury here, no sense of warmth or convenience. The stone walls are cold, the floors are hard, and the forge's heat only serves to make the space unbearably oppressive. Sweat stings your eyes, and your clothes stick to your body as the furnace burns brighter, hotter, demanding more of you. Your arms ache with the repetitive motion of hammering, your hands blistered and cracked from the constant grip of the tools. Yet, there's no time to think of comfort. In the world of the blacksmith, comfort is a luxury no one can afford. Historians still argue whether the physical toll of blacksmithing was acknowledged in medieval times or if it was simply part of the job that came with survival. Some suggest that blacksmiths were often seen as heroes in their communities, praised for their strength and skill, while others point to the fact that the profession's demanding nature left little room for personal satisfaction. Either way, the work was grueling, and the physical strain was as much a part of the job as the tools they worked with. Yet, despite the pain and sacrifice, the work in the forge is necessary. As a blacksmith, you provide essential services to the village and the kingdom. You are responsible for crafting the tools that farmers use to tend their fields, the weapons that soldiers rely on for protection, and the horseshoes that ensure the horses are ready for travel. Without your work, the machinery of the medieval world would grind to a halt. Your role in society is not just important, it's vital. The people in your village may never fully appreciate the sweat and pain that goes into your craft, but they certainly rely on it. They see you as an essential part of the community, and they trust you to provide them with the tools they need to live and survive. The blacksmith is respected, though often misunderstood. While the work is hard, it's also the backbone of the medieval economy, allowing people to live, work, and fight for their survival. The blacksmith is both creator and defender, providing not just tools, but protection for everyone. Historians still argue whether the blacksmith's role was more about creating for the people, or whether it was simply about surviving. Some suggest that blacksmiths were the unsung heroes of medieval life, quietly laboring in their shops to keep society running smoothly, while others argue that the pressure to constantly create led to burnout and exhaustion. Either way, it's clear that the blacksmith's work was crucial, and their role in the community was one of both honor and hardship. As the day continues, the forge becomes even hotter, and you can feel the weariness settle in your bones. The day's work is endless, but so is your resolve. You press on, shaping metal, creating weapons and tools, knowing that without your effort, the world would be a far less equipped and far more dangerous place. You feel the tension in your muscles, the weight of the hammer in your hands, but you refuse to stop. The work never ends. Historians still debate whether the blacksmith's endurance was a testament to the human spirit or simply a reflection of medieval society's demands for self-sufficiency. Some suggest that blacksmiths had a deep sense of pride in their craft, while others argue that the profession was marked by a relentless cycle of work with little time for rest or personal fulfillment. Either way, the blacksmith's endurance is a key element of the profession, surviving day after day, forging the future with every strike of the hammer. As the sun begins to set and the forge cools slightly, the work doesn't stop. You've spent the entire day shaping metal, forging tools, and crafting weapons for your village. The work is exhausting, but it's also necessary. The forge is always alive, burning through the night if you don't tend to it. There's no closing time for a blacksmith. Work continues until the job is done. As the light dims and the shadows grow long, the shop takes on a different feel. The warmth of the fire offers a brief respite, but it's quickly replaced with the bite of the evening air that seeps through the cracks of the stone walls. You stand there, your tools scattered about, the hammer still heavy in your hand, and your work for the day far from over. Your body aches and your muscles are screaming for relief, but you don't stop. The task at hand is far too important. You may be tired, but you can't afford to show it, especially with the winter months ahead. The forge's fire crackles, the heat rising in waves, and the room is alive with the sound of metal on metal. You take a deep breath, steady yourself, and pick up your tongs once again to lift a piece of red-hot metal from the fire. You bring it to the anvil, feeling the fatigue in your bones, but pushing through. Knowing that the world depends on your craftsmanship, historians still argue whether the blacksmith's stamina was just the result of physical toughness, or if it was something more, perhaps a deep-seated sense of duty, or the drive to contribute to the survival of the village and the kingdom. Some suggest that the blacksmith's mental resilience kept them going, while others argue that their ability to endure the hard labor was simply a matter of surviving in a world where rest was a luxury few could afford. Either way, the blacksmiths' ability to continue working despite overwhelming fatigue speaks to the resilience required to live in medieval times. The blacksmith shop is far from a sanctuary. It's a place of constant labor. The noise of the hammer striking metal is relentless, and the heat from the forge never truly fades. There are no moments of rest here, no breaks from the work. As the fire in the hearth burns low, you know that tomorrow will be much the same. You'll wake up early, you'll face the grind, and you'll return to the same routine that defines your existence. And yet, there's something deeply ingrained in youth, the understanding that this is your life. It's not easy, and it's far from glamorous, but it is essential. You may not be celebrated like the knights or the lords, but your work keeps everything running. You are the backbone of society, the one who ensures the tools and weapons of the world are forged with skill and precision. Historians still debate whether medieval blacksmiths were more than just laborers, or whether they were simply viewed as skilled workers without the prestige enjoyed by other professions. Some argue that blacksmiths were seen as masters of their craft, respected for their expertise and the essential role they played in the functioning of medieval society. Others suggest that blacksmiths were viewed as necessary but humble, expected to toil without recognition or reward. Either way, the blacksmith's place in the medieval hierarchy was crucial to the success of the kingdom. Even if it was often overlooked by the elite, by the time the night draws near, your work has slowed. But the exhaustion remains. You step back, finally surveying the results of the day's efforts. The sword you've crafted gleams in the firelight, a perfect piece of workmanship, sharp, balanced, and ready for its destined wielder. A sense of satisfaction settles over you. Despite the physical toll, despite the endless hours of toil, there's a moment of clarity in the midst of it all. This is what you do. This is your craft. The blacksmith's work is never finished, but each piece you create is a testament to your skill, your endurance, and your ability to survive in a world that asks everything of you. Historians still argue whether the physical labor of medieval blacksmiths was matched by psychological satisfaction in their work. Some suggest that blacksmiths took pride in creating useful, lasting objects, while others believe that the constant workload left little room for personal pride. Either way, it's clear that the blacksmith's sense of duty and purpose was one of the defining features of their craft. As the night falls and the fire in the forge dims, you prepare to rest, knowing that tomorrow will bring another day of hard work. But for now, the forge is still, the hammer is silent, and you can rest your weary body. Tomorrow, the cycle begins again. The next morning arrives, and you can feel the cold creeping in through the cracks of the stone walls. It's a chill that gnaws at your bones, the kind that makes it impossible to forget the harsh realities of life as a blacksmith. The moment you rise, the familiar weight of your body settles in the aches, the tiredness, the strain from the day before. The work is far from over, and there's no time for complaints. The furnace needs to be stoked, the tools need to be sharpened, and the metal must be melted, shaped, and tempered. Historians still debate whether the physical pain endured by medieval blacksmiths was a result of the constant exposure to the forge's heat, or if it was a product of years of hard labor and repetitive motion. Some suggest that the blacksmith's endurance came from sheer grit, while others argue that the toll on the body was so severe that it led to early retirement for many artisans. Either way, it's clear that working in the forge was not a job. For the faint of heart, you open the door to the forge, greeted by the familiar warmth of the fire. The flickering flames cast shadows on the walls, and you hear the familiar crackling of wood as it burns. You begin the ritual of stoking the fire, feeding it with charred wood and coal. The temperature rises steadily, and you can feel the heat wrap around you like a blanket, almost oppressive in its intensity. It's a strange feeling. The warmth of the forge contrasts with the coldness outside, creating a world where you are always caught between extremes. The furnace rages on, its flames licking the air as you continue to add fuel. The sound of crackling logs fills the space, and the smell of burning coal becomes overwhelming, almost suffocating. As you approach the hearth, you can feel the fire radiating heat, making your skin burn even from a distance. Take a deep breath, sweat already beading on your brow, and grab the tongs. The metal you need to work with is now glowing orange, almost as if it's alive, and you carefully maneuver it onto the anvil. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths could have become accustomed to the constant heat of the forge, or whether it was always a source of physical discomfort. Some argue that the constant exposure to extreme temperatures might have caused long-term health effects, while others suggest that the human body has a remarkable ability to adapt. Either way, the forge's heat was both a challenge and an essential tool for the blacksmith's craft. With the metal heated to the right temperature, it's time to begin shaping it. You grab your hammer and tongs, positioning the hot piece of metal on the anvil. The hammer feels heavier than usual, the sweat pouring down your face as you swing it down with a force that shakes your whole body. The metal responds with a satisfying clang, and the shape begins to take form. The work is grueling, the repetition, unending, but you keep at it, knowing that the piece will soon be complete. The rhythm of the hammer strike becomes a kind of meditation as you move through the work. Each strike is deliberate, each blow a step closer to completion. You can feel the exhaustion in your arms, the tightness in your joints, but you push through because you have no choice. The work must be done, and there's no room for weakness. The pieces you craft aren't just tools or weapons, they're lifelines for the people in your village. The sword you forge today may save a warrior's life, the plow might ensure. The harvest and the horseshoe could help someone get from place to place. It's not just work, it's your purpose, your way of contributing to the survival of the world around you. Historians still debate whether medieval blacksmiths were seen as creators of tools or manufacturers of necessities. Some suggest that they were revered for their ability to craft weapons that would shape the fate of kingdoms, while others believe that their work was seen as nothing more than functional, a means to an end. Either way, the blacksmith was always essential to medieval society, a cornerstone of civilization, providing the tools and materials that made everyday life possible. By the time the day's work is done, you are physically exhausted. Your hands are sore, your back is aching, and your head is spinning from the heat and the constant motion. Yet, there's a sense of accomplishment that accompanies the weariness. The forge has been fed, the metal shaped, and the work completed. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin again, but for now, you can allow yourself a brief moment of respite. The fire crackles softly in the corner of the room, the last embers of the day's work burning out as the forge cools and the day winds to a close. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths found true satisfaction in their work or whether it was simply a means of survival. Some argue that the sense of craftsmanship and the pride in creating something useful gave blacksmiths a sense of purpose. Others suggest that the physical toll and the constant demands of the job left little room for joy or fulfillment. Either way, the blacksmith's life was shaped by the forge, the fire, and the unrelenting demands of the craft. The days continue to blur into one another as you live out your life in the forge. The rhythm of your work becomes almost mechanical, a continuous cycle of shaping, hammering, and heating. The satisfaction of completing a piece of sword, a hoe, a horseshoe lasts for only a moment before the next task looms ahead. You have no time to stop, no room for rest. The grind of your life as a medieval blacksmith is relentless, and each day brings with it new challenges and demands. The forge is your world. It's where you spend most of your waking hours, and it's where you are most comfortable, even though it's filled with heat, smoke, and the constant clang of metal. Your body has become accustomed to the blistering heat, the repetitive motion of hammering, and the stinging sweat in your eyes. The furnace is the source of your power. Without it, there is no work, no livelihood. It's your responsibility to maintain the fire, to keep the flames high, to ensure that the metal stays hot enough to be worked. The fire is both a friend and an enemy, can give you warmth and light, but it also demands respect. A single mistake can result in a burn, a scalding injury. Or even worse, historians still argue whether the blacksmith's relationship with fire was purely functional or whether it held a more spiritual significance. Some suggest that blacksmiths saw the fire as a sacred force harnessed by their craft, while others argue that it was simply a tool of survival, a means to achieve their work. Either way, the forge's fire was both a literal and metaphorical source of life, life that burned as fiercely as the flames that heated the metal. As you stand before the forge, you marvel at the metal of the profession. The hammer is still heavy in your hand, the tongs still warm from their work. Your body aches from the hours spent in the heat, but you don't stop. Heat and hammering have shaped you, hardened you into someone who can survive the harsh realities of life. You can feel the calluses on your hands, the worn spots on your clothing, the soreness in your back and legs from standing for hours at a time. But these physical reminders are just part of the life of a blacksmith. Pain is an old companion. It's something you've learned to live with. Historians still debate whether the medieval blacksmith's toughness was born out of necessity or whether it was a product of a different cultural mindset. Some argue that the constant exposure to the forge's heat, the repetitive labor, and the sheer physical demand made blacksmiths mentally tough, while others suggest that the job simply required an acceptance of hardship. Either way, the job was not for the faint of heart, and the mental fortitude required to push through day after day was just as crucial as the physical strength it demanded. You're in the middle of your day's work, and the forge is still roaring, its heat enveloping you like a blanket. But it's the mental exhaustion that sets in. It's not just the heat, the sweat, or the physical strain that wears you down. Needs the constant focus required to ensure everything goes as planned. Each piece of metal, each hammer strike must be calculated, measured. If you miss, it could ruin the entire piece. There's no room for mistakes. In the blacksmith's world, perfection is demanded, and it comes at the cost of both physical and mental energy. Historians still argue whether the life of a medieval blacksmith was mentally taxing, given the focus and precision required for the craft. Some suggest that blacksmiths were mentally strong, able to keep their composure under intense pressure, while others argue that the mental strain could have led to anxiety and mental health struggles. Either way, it's clear that the work of a blacksmith was not just about muscle, it was about being constantly alert, constantly aware of the pressure to perform. As the sun sets, you find a brief moment of respite, but it's only temporary. You forge the tools and weapons for the day, but you know that tomorrow will bring the same grueling cycle. The work never ends, but neither do the rewards. Every piece you create is a small victory, a reflection of your skill, your strength, and your resilience. Your life as a blacksmith is defined not by the work itself, but by the will to continue, to push through the pain, and to forge on. Historians still debate whether the blacksmith's sense of fulfillment came from the quality of their work or the simple satisfaction of surviving. Some believe that the sense of mastery over fire and metal brought blacksmiths a deep sense of accomplishment, while others argue that the endless grind of the job left little room for satisfaction. Either way, the life of a medieval blacksmith was one of dedication, and the reward was not always in rest, but in the work itself. The next morning, you wake up with the same heavy weight on your shoulders, the physical exhaustion still lingering from the day before. Your body aches from the constant hammering, your fingers sore and blistered from the tongs and the heat. The forge is calling again, the furnace already crackling, eager for more work. There's no time for rest. The village needs tools, the king needs weapons, and the horses need shoes. You can feel the weight of the world pressing down on you, but you push through. After all, this is the life of a medieval blacksmith. Stopping, never resting, just working to ensure the survival of your community. You move to the forge, the heat already radiating as you stoke the flames. The fire is alive, a constant reminder of the power and danger of the forge. You feed the flames with coal and wood, watching as the embers flare up. The air is thick with smoke, and the temperature inside the forge is already unbearable. This is where you must be. The furnace is where you create, where you turn raw metal into something usable, something that will change the course of a battle or the success of a harvest. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths became immune to the constant heat and physical labor they endured, or if the toll on their health was devastating. Some suggest that blacksmiths were hardened by years of exposure to the forge and fire, while others believe that the job led to serious health complications, from heat stroke to chronic pain. Either way, the blacksmith's relationship with the forge was one of endurance. Whether they adapted to it or simply survived, the moment you step into the forge, you feel the temperature hit you like a wall. The heat from the furnace is almost unbearable, but you don't flinch. You've been here before, and you know that the work must be done. The hammer is still heavy in your hand, the tongs still warm from yesterday's work. You pick them up again and begin your routine. The metal is heated, glowing orange, ready to be shaped. You move quickly, expertly, the heat now an old companion, familiar yet always demanding. You can hear the clang of metal against metal, the rhythmic beat of your hammer striking the anvil. This is your world, the clang, the heat, the sweat, the endless work. Historians still debate whether the blacksmith's labor was driven by a sense of duty, or if it was simply a way to survive in a harsh and unforgiving world. Some suggest that the blacksmith's work was seen as noble and necessary, while others argue that the job was simply a means to make ends meet. Either way, the blacksmith's role in society was pivotal, shaping the tools that allowed people to survive, grow, and thrive. The work may have been brutal, but it was essential. As the day stretches on, you begin to feel the fatigue. Your muscles ache and your hands are slick with sweat, but you don't stop. You can't afford to. The pieces you're working on are needed by the community, and you have no choice but to keep going. The blacksmith's life is one of relentless labor. There's no room for weakness, no space for rest. If you don't work, you don't eat. If you don't forge, the people suffer. Historians still argue whether the life of a blacksmith was simply a matter of survival or whether it was a calling. Some suggest that blacksmiths found pride in their work, that they believed they were building the foundation of society, one hammer strike at a time. Others argue that the work was purely functional, driven by the need to provide for the community. Either way, the blacksmith's work was grueling, and the toll it took on the body was undeniable. At the end of the day, the work doesn't stop. You finished your pieces for the day, but there's still the fire to tend to, the tools to sharpen, and the ever-present need to prepare for tomorrow's work. The day has come to an end, but there's no relief. Tomorrow, the same grind will begin again. The forge will burn, the hammer will strike, and the world will continue to turn. Dependent on the work of people like you blacksmiths, builders of the world. You are both creator and survivor, part of a long tradition of hard labor that keeps the medieval world alive. Historians, still, debate whether the blacksmith's life was one of glory or suffering. Some suggest that the work brought honor, while others argue that it was simply a harsh way of life that required stamina, resilience, and grit. Either way, the blacksmith's existence was defined by the forge, the fire, the hammer, the metal, and the endless work that kept medieval society moving forward. The next day arrives, and you step back into the forge, where the familiar heat immediately assaults you. It's a force that you've grown accustomed to over the years, but that doesn't make it any more bearable. The moment you approach the furnace, you feel the same wave of intensity hit you, and the heat seems to press down on you, suffocating and unforgiving. Yet, despite the weariness that lingers in your bones, you can't afford to stop. You must work forged to survive. Your tools wait for you, and the fire is always hungry. As always, the anvil calls your name, and you step forward, ready to begin the grind once again. The constant hammering reverberates through your arms. And with each strike of the hammer against the red-hot metal, you push aside the exhaustion and pain that threaten to overtake you. You're used to it by now. Your muscles are built for this work. The rhythm of hammering, the familiar clang of metal, becomes second nature as you shape the metal. The day's goal is clear. The tools and weapons that you create must serve. Their purpose, whether it's for a farmer's plow or a soldier's sword. It's a matter of life and death in some ways, and the weight of that responsibility doesn't lighten. Even as the heat grows more intense, historians still debate whether the blacksmith's relationship with their tools was one of intimacy or detachment. Some suggest that blacksmiths viewed their tools as sacred, almost like extensions of their bodies, while others argue that the blacksmith's work was driven by necessity, with little thought to the personal connection between craftsman and tool. Either way, the tools were essential to the blacksmith's craft, and the blacksmith's ability to master them determined their success. As you continue your work, there is no time for distraction. Your focus remains entirely on the metal, on the anvil, and the tools that you must create. The world outside the forge may be cold and harsh, but within these walls, you are in control. The fire is yours to command, and with each strike, you mold the raw material into something new, something essential. Yet, even within the forge's warmth, there is an undeniable sense of loneliness that comes with the job. The blacksmith's life is one of isolation, with few moments for socializing or resting. Your companions are the tools, the fire, and the endless routine. Historians still argue whether the loneliness of the blacksmith's trade was something to be embraced or whether it was an inherent curse. Some believe that blacksmiths were content to live within the confines of their work, away from the distractions of social life, while others argued that the isolation took a mental toll on the workers, leading to burnout and depression. Either way, the blacksmith's existence was marked by long, solitary hours in the forge, with the weight of the craft pressing down like the hammer on the anvil as the workday stretches on. You feel the strain of the hammering in your shoulders, your arms, and your legs. The weight of the work builds, and the repetitive nature of it becomes almost hypnotic. Your focus sharpens as you make your way through the task, one blow at a time. It's not easy. Nothing about the blacksmith's life is easy but theirs. A sense of pride in the craftsmanship, in the precision, in the fact that what you create matters. It will be used, it will serve, and it will endure long after you've left this forge. The sword you craft today could end up in the hands of a knight, while the nail might help build a barn for a family. Every piece you make contributes to the world around you. Historians still debate whether the work of the blacksmith was truly fulfilling, or if it was simply a form of endurance. Some suggest that blacksmiths found meaning in creating tools that shaped the course of history, while others argued that the work was more about surviving the grind of the trade. Either way, it's clear that the blacksmith's role was crucial to the medieval world, providing the essential materials that allowed society to function. By the time the day ends and the furnace dims, you step back, feeling the familiar ache in your body. It's not just the physical fatigue that weighs on you, it's the mental exhaustion as well. The fire may have cooled, but the work never ends. Tomorrow will bring a new set of tasks, a new round of hammering and shaping. But for tonight, the forge is quiet. The weight of the tools, the metal, and the responsibility will stay with you, even as you leave the forge for a few hours of rest. And though you are weary, you know that this life, with all its hardships, is the one you have chosen, the one you've committed to. The blacksmith's craft is brutal, but it's also necessary. And for now, that's all that matters. Historians still argue whether the mental exhaustion of the blacksmith's work was as significant as the physical toll it took. Some suggest that the mental strain of repetitive labor contributed to the feeling of burnout, while others believe the blacksmith's mental focus on the craft helped them cope with the harshness of the job. Either way, the work of the medieval blacksmith was an unyielding test of both body and mind, demanding constant endurance and resilience. The following day feels much the same, but you're learning to live with the grind. Every day brings new challenges, perhaps a new order, or a difficult piece of metal to shape, but there's no room for hesitation, only action. The forge greets you with the same heat, the same pressure, the same physical demands. The rhythmic clang of your hammer against the anvil fills your ears, a constant beat that drives you forward, though the fatigue never truly leaves. You can feel the strain in your body, a deep ache that seems to settle into your bones. Yet, there's no rest in sight. The job is a continuum, one that doesn't allow for pauses or distractions. The work is constant, and you must keep up, because the world around you depends on it. Your life as a blacksmith is defined by this repetition, by the daily act of forging, shaping, and creating. The pieces you craft today may be used to defend, to build, or to sustain, and you carry the weight of that responsibility with each hammer stroke. There is a certain power in the work you do, a sense of purpose in knowing that what you create is vital to the survival of your community. But the work is grueling, and it doesn't come without its toll. The hours spent hammering at hot metal are long, and the repetitive nature of it all can make your mind feel like it's moving in a fog. Yet you push forward, one strike at a time, because you know there's no alternative. Historians still debate whether the blacksmith's endurance was fueled by a deep sense of duty, or whether it was simply the need to survive in a harsh world. Some suggest that blacksmiths saw their work as a calling, a way to contribute to the larger world and their community. Others argue that the hardship of the job made it a form of endurance, where survival depended on pushing through the exhaustion and the physical strain. Either way, it's clear that the blacksmith's life was built on the ability to withstand the toll of daily labor and maintain the grit necessary to carry on. The forge itself is a demanding environment, a place where the temperature fluctuates wildly, from the blazing heat of the fire to the chill of the outside world that waits just beyond the workshop's walls. You feel the temperature shift as you stand near the furnace, the heat rising in waves, seeping into your clothes and your skin. The sweat beads on your forehead, stinging your eyes as you push the piece of metal into the fire. The flames flare up, casting an eerie glow on the walls of the workshop, and you step back, wiping your brow with the back of your hand. The temperature is always at extremes, but it's something you've grown used to over the years. You've learned to live in this space, to work with the forge's intense demands. There's no other way, wits, the only way you know. Historians still debate whether the blacksmith's relationship with the extreme heat was a form of adaptation, or if it was simply part of the job. some believe that blacksmiths developed a resilience to the constant heat, while others argue that it was a physical toll that took years off their lives. Either way, it's undeniable that working with fire and metal every day led to a level of tolerance that few others could endure. In the midst of all this, you can't help but wonder about the future of the craft. Will it endure for future generations? Or will it become a thing of the past? The world around you is always changing, and while the forge is a symbol of stability, there are whispers of advancement, of new tools and ways to shape the world. But for now, you are rooted in this reality: the hammer, the fire, the anvil. And the work historians still argue whether the profession of the blacksmith will continue to thrive in the coming centuries, or whether it will become obsolete as new technologies replace traditional crafts. Some believe that the advancements in metallurgy will make the blacksmith's craft less relevant, while others suggest that the skill of shaping metal will always have a place in society, albeit in a different form. Either way, the craft of blacksmithing has endured for centuries, and it's unlikely that it will disappear anytime soon. As the day comes to a close, the forge quiets. You feel the weight of the work settle into your bones, the exhaustion settling over you like a heavy blanket. Your hands are raw, your muscles sore, and your mind is tired, but the work is done for now. Tomorrow, the process will begin again: hammer, fire, metal, over and over. The forge never stops, but for tonight, the fire fades and the world outside. The forge continues, unaware of the grueling work that keeps it all turning. Historians still debate whether blacksmiths found satisfaction in the repetitive nature of their work, or if it was simply a grind for survival. Some believe the sense of pride in their craftsmanship was enough to sustain them, while others suggest that the job was simply a way to endure the hardships of medieval life. Either way, the blacksmith's role in society remains indispensable, and it is through their resilience and skill that the world continues to thrive. Another day begins, and the cycle of labor continues as the forge crackles to life once again. The routine is as familiar as the air you breathe, the hammering and the heat becoming an intrinsic part of your being. As you approach the furnace, the warmth feels like a fleeting friend in a world that has grown colder. The forge always demands your attention, never offering a reprieve, as the fire in its belly burns with the same intensity as your own desire to continue to survive. Each new piece you create, whether a blade or a bracelet, is more than just a tool. It's a small piece of yourself that you are molding, bending to your will with every strike of the hammer. Yet, the forge is not a place of comfort. It's a place of work, a place where heat and sweat blur into one long, enduring existence. The weight of the hammer is familiar now, as much a part of you as your very hands. The repetitive motion of your arm, the clang of metal against metal, becomes a form of communication, a rhythm that speaks louder than any words. Every swing of the hammer is purposeful, a testament to your skill, and yet, each piece you create feels like another step in an unending journey of creation. Blacksmithing is not simply about forging metal. It is about shaping life itself, about carving out a place in a harsh world with your own two hands. Historians still debate whether blacksmiths had the ability to separate themselves from the physicality of their work, or whether their craft became an obsession, a means of survival that drained them mentally and physically. Some argue that blacksmiths found a sense of peace in the act of creating, a rhythm that allowed them to forget the outside world for a moment, while others believe that the grind of the trade wore down the mind, leaving them little room for anything but their craft. Either way, the blacksmith's life was one of constant labor and endurance, one that demanded their full attention and presence. As you stand at the anvil, metal glowing bright orange in the furnace, you notice the growing wear on your hands, the calluses, the blisters, the cracks in your skin that have become a permanent fixture. Yet, there is no time to worry about these marks of the trade. They are simply a part of the work. The forge doesn't care about your comfort, and neither can you. You are part of an ancient tradition, one that has lasted centuries, passed down. From generation to generation, the blacksmith's craft is not just a job, it's a legacy, a connection to a time long past, a way to shape the world that will be handed down to the next generation, just as it was handed to you. Historians still argue whether blacksmithing was viewed as a noble trade, a skill worthy of respect, or whether it was simply a necessary evil in a society that relied on physical labor. Some suggest that blacksmiths were deeply respected for their ability to shape tools and weapons, while others argue that the manual labor of the trade left them outside the realm of the aristocracy. Either way, blacksmiths were essential too. Medieval society. And their work was invaluable even if it wasn't always acknowledged. As the day wears on and the fire rages, you begin to feel the strain of the work. The heat from the furnace, the constant hammering, and the repetitive nature of the task leave you exhausted, but you know that there is no time for rest. The work must continue because the village relies on you. Every strike of the hammer, every piece of metal you shape is a part of the foundation that keeps everything standing. Without your tools, your weapons, and your craft, the world would fall apart. The weight of that responsibility presses down on you, but you carry it with pride, knowing that your work sustains not just your own survival, but the survival of the community. Historians still debate whether blacksmiths were driven by a deep sense of duty or whether their work was merely a means to survive. Some argue that blacksmiths were fueled by the need to provide for their families and ensure the strength of the community, while others suggest that the craft was a reflection of their pride in their work and the mastery of their skill. Either way, the blacksmith's existence was one of constant labor, endurance, and resilience, a life defined by the need to create for the survival of others. As the day comes to an end, you know that tomorrow will bring more of the same. The forge will burn, the hammer will strike, and the work will continue, just as it has for centuries. There's no stopping now. The cycle of work, creation, and survival is unending, but it is what you do. It is your life, and despite the toll it takes on your body and mind, you wouldn't have it any other way. The months continue to roll by, each day blending into the next as the blacksmith's life remains constant, defined by the endless labor of shaping metal. The furnace is always burning, and your hammer is always in hand, striking against the sea. Anvil shaping, forming, creating. There are no moments of respite. The world outside may change, but in the forge, there is only the relentless cycle of heat, metal, and sweat. The cold of the outside world is a distant memory, a fleeting thought that fades away when you step into the forge's warmth. In here, the fire rolls its heat, all-encompassing, both a necessity and a burden. You feel the familiar tension in your body as you move through your tasks. The work has become routine, but it is never any easier. Your arms are sore from the constant hammering, and your fingers ache from the grip on the tongs. The heat of the forge seeps into your skin, drying it out, cracking it open like old leather. But the forge demands your attention, and so you press on, hands blistered and swollen, muscles tired but resolve as unshakable as the metal you work with. The life of a blacksmith is not meant for comfort. It's meant for survival. Historians still argue whether the repetition of the blacksmith's work caused mental fatigue or whether it cared allowed the worker to develop a form of mental toughness. Some believe that the constant labor and physical strain led to a deep sense of resilience, while others suggest that the mind may have dulled, leading to a sense of boredom or even despair over time. Either way, the blacksmith's life was one of endurance and dedication to the craft. The fire is always there, always calling you to the forge. There is no time for idle thought or personal reflection. The hammer strikes the anvil in a steady rhythm, one after the other, over and over again. It's a dance of sorts, a dance of creation. But it's also a battle against the heat, the toll on your body, and the demands of the world. The blacksmith's existence is built on this constant push forward, on the desire to survive and to contribute to the society that depends on your skill. The work itself is a means of survival. You don't forge, you don't eat. If you don't make the tools and weapons, the kingdom cannot function. You are both creator and survivor. Historians still debate whether the blacksmith's role in medieval society was more honored or whether it was simply an overlooked but necessary function. Some suggest that blacksmiths were revered for their skill, their ability to work with fire and metal, while others point to the fact that blacksmiths were still at the mercy of their rulers, their livelihoods tied to the demands of nobility and warfare. Either way, it is undeniable that the blacksmith was an essential part of medieval society, the one who kept it running. Even if their work went unnoticed, your hands, calloused and worn from years of work, continue their work without pause. You've become one with the forge, your movements precise, each strike of the hammer deliberate. The anvil rings with the sound of your blows, and the heat from the furnace seems to pull at you, urging you forward. There's no time to stop. No time to consider the toll it takes on your body. Your muscles ache, but they've become accustomed to the strain. Your mind, sharp and focused, shuts out the fatigue and keeps moving forward. Historians still argue whether the physical toll of blacksmithing led to a shortened life expectancy or whether blacksmiths were able to adapt to the demands of their trade. Some suggest that the blacksmith's physical endurance allowed them to keep going well into old age, while others argue that the constant stress on the body led to serious health complications that cut lives short. Either way, it's clear that the blacksmith's life was marked by hardship, and that the work, though essential, was not without cost. As the day draws to a close and the last piece is forged, you step back and take a deep breath. The forge is quieter now, the heat less oppressive as the flames begin to die down. The metal is cold now, the piece completed and ready for use. There's a sense of satisfaction in the work, but it is fleeting. You know that tomorrow will bring more of the same, more hammering, more shaping, more forging. There is no end. To it, only a continuum. The blacksmith's life is a life of endurance, of perseverance in the face of adversity. Historians still argue whether the blacksmith's sense of pride in their work came from the creation itself or from the sheer ability to keep going. Some suggest that blacksmiths found fulfillment in the act of crafting something that would last, while others argue that the satisfaction came from simply surviving another day of toil. Either way, the blacksmith's work was a testament to resilience, a life of relentless work in a world that demanded nothing less. Another day, and you find yourself once again at the forge, ready to face the unrelenting heat and endless labor. The forge is already alive with the crackling of the fire, the embers glowing brightly in the hearth, waiting for you to begin. The moment you approach the furnace, the familiar heat presses against you, wrapping around you like an old companion. It's both comforting and oppressive. You pull on your worn gloves, and the reality of the day ahead hits you once again. The work never stops. It never gives you a chance to rest. You can feel the weight of the work ahead of you, the countless pieces to forge, the tools to sharpen, and the arms to create. As you begin your work, the hammer feels heavy in your hand. Every strike is deliberate, calculated, each blow another step closer to completing your task. The rhythm of the work settles into a familiar pattern. Heat, metal, hammering, the sound of the anvil ringing out fills the forge as you press on. Sweat runs down your face as you swing the hammer again and again, shaping the metal into the tools and weapons that will soon be put to use. There's something almost meditative about the constant repetition, the continuous cycle of work, but it's also grueling. The physical toll is constant, and as your body aches with each movement, You can't help but wonder how long you'll be able to keep this up. Yet, there is no choice. The forge calls to you, and you must answer. Historians still debate whether the physical wear and tear on a blacksmith's body was inevitable, or if it was a consequence of the relentless demands placed on them. Some suggest that blacksmiths were able to push through the pain, developing a level of resilience that allowed them to work despite the toll. Others argue that the strain on their bodies led to early deterioration, with many blacksmiths suffering from muscle pain and joint problems long before they reached old age. Either way, the toll of the blacksmith's life was a heavy one that could not be ignored, as the forge burns hotter. You can feel the sweat soaking your clothes, the heat pressing in from all sides. Your body aches, your muscles sore from the constant motion. The heat is unbearable, but you cannot stop. The work is far from done, and every piece must be perfect. There is no room for mistakes, no space for slacking off. You push through, forcing your focus to stay sharp, even as the heat makes it harder to concentrate. But you've learned to cope with the discomfort, to ignore the pain. In the forge, there is no room for weakness. The forge demands your strength, your endurance, and your focus. Historians still argue whether the blacksmith's determination came from a deep sense of pride in their craft, or whether it was simply a survival instinct honed over years of brutal labor. Some believe that blacksmiths found pride in their expertise and the creation of tools that would shape history, while others argue that the need for survival, the necessity to keep working to feed oneself and family, was the driving force. Either way, the blacksmith's endurance was critical to their survival and to the functioning of the world around them. As you pause to take a breath, your eyes wander to the pile of metal pieces stacked nearby, waiting for their turn in the furnace. There's always more work to be done. The forge never rests, and neither can you. The weight of your craft presses down on you. You are not just shaping metal, you are shaping the world, one piece at a time. Every hammer strike is a reminder that you are a part of something bigger than yourself, something essential to the fabric of medieval society. The people of your village rely on you, and the kingdom depends on the tools you create to sustain life and protect it. Historians still argue whether medieval blacksmiths were more than just laborers, whether they were artisans whose work was valued for its beauty and precision. Some believe that blacksmiths were regarded as skilled craftsmen, revered for their ability to create objects of lasting value, while others argue that their work was merely utilitarian, functional, and without much regard for artistry. Either way, the blacksmith's role in medieval society was indispensable, and without their expertise, the world would be a much less capable and much less secure place. The day continues, and as the forge begins to cool, you realize that there's a deep sense of satisfaction in your work, despite the exhaustion. You've created something of value today, a tool, a weapon, a necessity for a brief moment. You allow yourself to step back and appreciate the craft. It's easy to get lost in the grind, to focus only on the physical demands of the job. But in the quiet moments, when the work is done and the forge cools, you can't help but feel a sense of pride in your contribution to the world. Historians still debate whether the satisfaction of being a blacksmith came from creating something useful, or whether it was simply about the survival of doing something that was necessary for the community. Some argue that the satisfaction came from mastery over the craft, while others believe it came from knowing that the blacksmith's work was what kept society running, one hammer strike at a time. Either way, it's clear that the blacksmith's sense of fulfillment came from knowing their work was vital. As the day ends, you finally step back, your hands aching, your body tired, but your mind clear. Tomorrow will bring more of the same, but for now, you can rest. You've earned it, even if it's just for a few short hours. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin again, but tonight, the forge is quiet, and for the first time today, you can breathe. The morning sun rises, but the forge calls your name once more. The fire is already roaring, eager to consume the coal and wood you'll feed it. As you pull on your thick, worn gloves, the weight of the day ahead presses down on you. But you've grown used to this weight. Every day is the same never-ending cycle of hammering, shaping, and forging. Yet there's no time for hesitation. The forge is a constant, demanding your full attention, your strength, and your focus. The world outside the walls of the workshop might change, but inside, there's no room for anything but the relentless rhythm of metal work. You step into the heat of the forge, feeling the familiar warmth as it wraps around you, nearly suffocating in its intensity. The fire crackles in the hearth, and the metal already lies waiting, glowing orange, ready to be shaped. The anvil is your stage, the hammer your tool of creation. Your body has become accustomed to the rhythm of this work strike. Shape, repeat. The hammer feels like an extension of your arm, as natural as your own muscle. The heat, the sweat, the work they've become as ingrained in you as breathing. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths saw the repetition of their work as a form of meditation or whether it was a mind-numbing task that led to mental fatigue. Some suggest that the act of hammering allowed for a kind of mental clarity, a space where the mind could drift as the body went through the motions. Others argue that the monotony of the work led to a disconnect, where the blacksmith simply endured rather than enjoyed the process. Either way, the blacksmith's craft was defined by repetition, by doing the same thing over and over again, until it became second nature. As the day drags on, your body feels the strain of the heat and hard labor. Each strike of the hammer makes your arms tremble, and each moment near the furnace leaves you feeling more exhausted. Yet, you don't stop. The forge demands constant attention, does not rest, and neither can you. The work has to be done. Tools need to be sharpened, weapons must be crafted, and the community's needs are ever growing. The satisfaction of completion is fleeting. You're always thinking about the next piece, the next task. Perfection is always just out of reach, but you keep striving for it. It's not about achieving perfection, it's about enduring, about showing up and doing the work every day. Despite the exhaustion, historians still debate whether the constant grind of blacksmithing led to a sense of complacency or pride in the craft. Some suggest that blacksmiths took pride in their skill, in their ability to transform raw materials into something useful and durable. Others argue that blacksmiths saw their work as nothing more than a means of survival, a way to keep themselves and their families alive in a harsh and unforgiving world. Either way, the blacksmith's craft was a life of endurance, constant balancing act between the satisfaction of creation and the relentless grind of labor. As the forge grows quiet and the heat of the fire begins to wane, you take a moment to step back. The metal is shaped, the piece is complete. There's no celebration, no applause, no acknowledgement from the world outside the walls of the forge. But in this moment, you take a deep breath, and there is a small flicker of satisfaction. The work is done, and you've lived through another day of it. The toll it takes on your body is immense, but so too is the sense of pride in what you've accomplished. You've forged another tool, another weapon, another piece of a world that relies on your craft. It may not be glamorous, but it's real. It's necessary. Historians still argue whether the satisfaction of blacksmithing came from the utility of the objects created or from the process itself. Some believe that blacksmiths felt a deep sense of pride in creating something that would be used by others, while others suggest that the satisfaction came from the act of creation, from shaping the metal and watching it take form under the hammer. Either way, the work itself was essential, and it was the blacksmith who, through sheer perseverance, ensured that society's basic needs were met. As the day closes, the forge cools, and you prepare to leave. You gather your tools, wipe the sweat from your brow, and step outside. The world beyond the forge may be cold, dark, and uncertain. But for tonight, you've done your work. Tomorrow, the hammer will strike again, the furnace will burn, and the cycle will begin anew. The forge never rests, and neither do you. Historians still debate whether the blacksmith's life was one of fulfillment or drudgery. Some argue that the satisfaction of mastering the craft gave blacksmiths a sense of purpose and fulfillment, while others suggest that the work was nothing more than a tiring necessity. Either way, the blacksmith's role in medieval society was irreplaceable, a symbol of strength, endurance, and the unyielding drive to create. The following morning, the grind resumes. The fire crackles once again, its warmth filling the room, but there's no time to bask in it. You pull on your leather gloves and step into the forge, the metal pieces waiting for you, eager to be transformed. The hammer feels heavy in your hand as you begin the daily task of shaping metal into something useful. The rhythm of the work becomes almost hypnotic, a repetitive cycle that carries you through the hours. Each strike of the hammer is a reminder of the grit it takes to survive this life. It's a life built on endurance, a life that doesn't allow for breaks or relaxation. The forge is your world, and it demands your full attention. The heat from the furnace is oppressive, but it's familiar. You've lived with it for years. And now it almost feels like an old friend, one that keeps pushing you, never letting you rest. Your hands are already blistered and raw from the work, but you can't stop. The village depends on you, the kingdom depends on you, and the work must continue. You can feel your body responding to the demands of the forge, muscles tightening, sweat running down your face, and your heart pounding with the physical effort required to keep up. There's no room for hesitation. Every moment counts. Every hammer strike matters. Historians still argue whether the mental and physical toll of blacksmithing was something that could be overcome or whether it wore down the blacksmith over time. Some believe that the toughness required for the job was more than just physicality, was mental too. The ability to continue working day after day, year after year, despite the toll it took on the body, was seen as a sign of strength and resilience. Others argue that blacksmiths, like many laborers of the time, were simply surviving, living through the pain and exhaustion, with little chance for mental rejuvenation. Either way, the life of a blacksmith was unforgiving, and it took a certain kind of person to endure it. As you continue hammering the glowing metal, the familiar sounds of the forge become a sort of comfort, the steady rhythm of your work easing your mind. But there's always that lingering feeling that the next blow could be the one that makes or breaks the piece you're working on. Perfection is always the goal, but it's an ideal that's hard to achieve. The imperfections in the metal are sometimes impossible to avoid, and you know that not every piece you create will be flawless. But you try because your craft demands it. Your community depends on it. And even though the work is often harsh and unrelenting, you push through, knowing that what you create will serve a greater purpose. Historians still debate whether blacksmiths viewed the imperfections in their work as a personal failure or as a natural part of the craft. Some argue that blacksmiths took great pride in achieving perfection, while others suggest that they accepted the imperfections as an inherent part of their craft, a sign of the human element in every piece. Either way, it's clear that blacksmithing was a sacred task, one that demanded not just skill, but the willingness to accept flaws in the process. As the day draws to a close, you step back from the forge. Your arms are sore, your fingers aching, but the day's work is done. You've forged your pieces, shaped your metal, and created something that will serve a purpose. The heat of the furnace has cooled, and the workshop is quiet now, save for the distant crackling of the remaining embers. But you know that the rest will be brief. Tomorrow, the forge will burn again, and the work will begin anew. There's no rest for the blacksmith, no time to savor the satisfaction of completing a task. The grind continues, day after day, year after year. But there's a quiet pride in knowing that the work you do, though grueling, is essential. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths found peace in the repetitive nature of their craft or whether it was a burden they simply had to bear. Some suggest that blacksmiths saw their work as meditative, a way to clear the mind and focus on the task at hand. Others believe that the work was more about survival and the constant need to produce, with little room for mental rest or emotional release. Either way, the work of a blacksmith never ends, and the cycle of creation is as eternal as the forge itself. The blacksmith's life is a life of perseverance. Every day, the work continues, driven by the need to create, to build, to survive. And even as you step away from the forge at the end of the day, there's no escaping the knowledge that tomorrow will bring more of the same. But for now, you allow yourself a brief moment of respite. The fire may have cooled, but the cycle is far from over. Historians still debate whether the sense of purpose in blacksmithing came from the craft itself, or from the constant need to sustain one's life. Some argue that blacksmiths found fulfillment in the creation of something useful, while others suggest that the work was simply a means of survival, with little room for reflection or fulfillment. Either way, the blacksmith's role in medieval society was one of endurance, and the perseverance required to succeed in the craft was a testament to the blacksmith's strength and determination. The next day is no different from the last. The fire in the forge blazes brightly as you return to your usual tasks, but the weight of the work is starting to feel heavier. You're no longer just working to meet demands, you're working because it's the only way you know how to survive. Each piece of metal you shape is just another item to add to the pile. But as time goes on, the work feels increasingly mechanical. The repetition becomes hard to bear. The hammer feels heavy in your hand. The furnace's heat suffocating in its intensity. You can feel your body protesting, aching from the endless labor, but there's no choice. You must continue. The hammer strikes and the metal bends. Despite the exhaustion, there's a small flicker of satisfaction that comes with completing a piece, even if it's only temporary. When you finish a tool or a weapon, you take a brief moment to admire the result of your work, but it's fleeting. The world outside the forge doesn't stop. There's always more work, always another task to be done. There's no time to linger over your accomplishments, no time to savor the fruits of your labor. The grind continues. The life of a blacksmith is a cycle of creation and exhaustion, with no room for respite or celebration. Historians still debate whether the blacksmith's life was one of satisfaction or dissatisfaction. Some argue that blacksmiths found fulfillment in the skill they honed, in the craftsmanship of their work, while others suggest that the constant grind and lack of rest led to a sense of burnout or resentment. Either way, the nature of the work was constant, and whether a blacksmith found satisfaction or not, it was an unavoidable aspect of their existence. As the day wears on, you feel the strain of the physical labor begin to seep into your bones. The aches in your shoulders, arms, and legs grow stronger, but you keep pushing forward. You can't stop now. There's always something that needs to be made: hoes, weapons, horseshoes, and the village relies on you. The responsibility weighs on you heavily, but you carry it with quiet determination. The forge is a place of both creativity and consumption. It takes your time, your energy, your body, but it also allows you to create something that has real value. You're forging more than just metal. You're shaping the world. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths viewed their work as a calling or a curse. Some suggest that blacksmiths were proud of their craft, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment when their work was used by others. Others argue that blacksmiths were simply trying to make it through the day with no time for reflections on their purpose. Either way, the blacksmith's craft was a fundamental part of medieval society, and the blacksmith's labor was crucial to the functioning of the world around them. By the end of the day, your body is aching. The hammer feels even heavier now, the wear of the constant labor taking its toll on you. The forge cools, the embers die down, and the pieces you've worked on are finally done. But there's no satisfaction, no relief. You know that tomorrow the cycle will start all over again, more hammering, more heat, more shaping. It's a never-ending task. The work never stops, and there's no one to help you carry the weight. Historians still debate whether the relentless nature of blacksmithing led to mental fatigue or whether it built mental resilience. Some argue that the blacksmith's ability to endure day after day, despite the physical and mental toll, was a sign of strength and resilience. Others suggest that the repetitive nature of the labor led to a sense of boredom, a lack of fulfillment that wore down the spirit. Either way, the blacksmith's life was defined by the grind, and whether it brought fulfillment or exhaustion, it was something that had to be endured as the night settles in. You leave the forge, your muscles sore, your hands raw, and your mind tired. You know that tomorrow will bring more of the same, but for now, you can rest at least for a few hours. The fire may be out, but the work is always with you, lingering in your muscles, in your bones, in the quiet moments before sleep. And tomorrow, you'll rise again to face it, because that's the way of a blacksmith, enduring, forging, and never giving up. Historians still argue whether the life of the blacksmith was truly fulfilling or whether it was an unrelenting task that drained the body and spirit. Some believe that the blacksmith found fulfillment in the act of creation, in the process of shaping metal into something useful. Others argue that the endless cycle of work left little room for joy, and that the blacksmith's life was defined more by endurance than by pride in the craft. Either way, the blacksmith's existence was one of hardship, and their resilience was key to the survival of their community. The cycle of labor continues, each day more grueling than the last. The heat of the forge is constant, a persistent force that presses on you from all directions. The furnace roars with its hunger for fuel, and the air is thick with the scent of coal and burning metal. Your clothes stick to your sweat-soaked body, and the weight of your tools feels like an extension of yourself, a heavy reminder of the relentless grind. As you work, you feel the toll the forge has taken on your body, worn from years of hammering. Your hands calloused and cracked, your muscles stiff from the constant strain. But still, you don't stop. The forge calls to you, and you answer. Over and over again, every strike of the hammer, every piece of metal shaped, every spark that flies from the anvil is part of the process of survival, of endurance. The blacksmith's life is one of repetition, but it's also one of creation. The tools and weapons you forge aren't just pieces of metal, they're pieces of the world itself. Each one plays a role in the larger picture, whether it's a plow to help feed the land or a sword to defend against invaders. You are shaping not just the tools, but the future, one hammer stroke at a time. Historians still argue whether the blacksmith's role in society was primarily to serve as a creator or a laborer. Some suggest that blacksmiths were revered for their skill, admired for their ability to shape metal into functional objects of great importance. Others argue that blacksmiths were simply servants to the needs of the community with their work, seen as nothing more than a necessary part of survival. Either way, the blacksmith's labor was indispensable to medieval society, and their contribution to the world was undeniable. As the day drags on, you continue your work in silence. The clang of the hammer against the anvil fills the air, and the heat from the furnace pushes you to your limits. But you keep going, because there's no other choice. Rest is a luxury that blacksmiths can't afford. If you stop, the work doesn't get done, and the community suffers. It's a harsh reality, but it's the life you've chosen. You don't think about the pain in your shoulders or the blisters on your hands. Your mind stays focused on the work at hand. On the metal, you're shaping into something useful. Historians still debate whether blacksmiths saw their work as dignified or whether they felt as though they were simply caught in a cycle of labor with little chance for rest or advancement. Some suggest that blacksmiths found purpose in the act of creation, while others believe that the constant grind made the job feel more like a burden than a vocation. Either way, the job was never ending, a cycle of constant work that demanded resilience and determination. As the sun begins to set, you feel the familiar weariness in your bones. The forge cools down, but the exhaustion doesn't leave you. The hammer falls silent, and the tools you've crafted sit neatly in their pile, ready for use. The fire still flickers in the hearth, the last embers of the day's labor, but you know that tomorrow it will start again. The grind never stops, never slows. There's always more to do, more to create. But for tonight, you allow yourself a few moments of rest, even if it's brief. Tomorrow, the work will continue. Historians still argue whether the blacksmiths' fatigue was something that became a part of their identity, or if it was simply a byproduct of the job. Some believe that blacksmiths embraced the hard work as a way of life, while others argue that the exhaustion eventually led to feelings of frustration and even resentment. Either way, the demanding nature of blacksmithing took a toll on the body, and the mental strain was just as heavy. The hammer rests on the anvil, and you step away for the night. Your body aches, and your hands throb from the constant work, but tomorrow the cycle will begin again. The forge will be ready, the furnace will burn, and the world will continue to turn, dependent on the work you and others like you do. The blacksmith's life is unforgiving, but it's also vital. There's a strange pride in that, a knowing that the work you do today will last long after you're gone. Historians still debate whether the pride blacksmiths felt in their work was enough to counterbalance the hardships they faced. Some suggest that the blacksmith's sense of accomplishment helped them endure the physical and mental toll of the job, while others argue that the lack of recognition for their efforts made the work feel thankless. Either way, the blacksmith's life was defined by hard work, and the tools they created were the foundation of a thriving medieval world. As the last day of another long week approaches, you step into the forge with the usual mix of exhaustion and determination. The work hasn't stopped, and neither have you. The hammer is as familiar to your hand as your own heartbeat, and the furnace still blazes, as eager as ever. The heat is suffocating, but you've grown used to it. Just as you've grown used to the weariness in your muscles and the constant ache in your body, there's no time to stop, no space for rest. The cycle continues. Each piece you work on is another opportunity to push your limits, to prove that you're still capable of enduring the grind. Weapons, tools, horseshoes, the tasks vary, but the work never does. You're constantly shaping, constantly forging, never allowing yourself to think beyond the task at hand. And yet, there's a sense of quiet pride in the work you do. The objects you create will serve a purpose. They'll be used by the farmers, soldiers, and merchants that make up the community, and they'll last far longer than you will. Your hands, though rough and cracked, have created something that endures beyond the limits of time. You've forged not just metal, but a legacy. Historians still argue whether the mental resilience of blacksmiths was a result of sheer necessity, or whether they found a form of strength in the act of creating. Some suggest that blacksmiths developed a mental fortitude from the unending demands of the trade, while others argue that the sheer toll of the work led to a mental fatigue that made the work feel like an obligation rather than a calling. Either way, blacksmiths were essential, and their work was driven by an unseen force, a mixture of survival, pride, and the relentless need to provide for the community. As the day wears on, you feel the weight of the work pressing down on you, and your movements become more sluggish. the strike of the hammer begins to feel heavier, the fire hotter, the air more oppressive. You push through, though. There's no room to stop. The village needs its tools, its weapons, and there's no time to rest. The work is never ending, and the only choice is to keep going. Your body aches, your mind is tired, but the forge is a constant, a place where you can always return, where you always know what's expected of you. The hammer, the furnace, and the anvil will remain. But you are always pushing against time. Historians still debate whether blacksmiths found a sense of comfort in the consistency of their work, or whether the repetition was ultimately draining. Some believe that blacksmiths appreciated the certainty that their work would always be needed, while others argue that the routine became a trap, a never-ending grind that left little room for anything beyond the forge. Either way, the blacksmith's craft was one of hardship and perseverance. And it's clear that blacksmiths were driven not just by the need for survival, but by a deeper connection to the work itself. As the final piece of the day is completed, you step back, wiping the sweat from your brow. The work is done for now, but you know that it will begin again tomorrow, just as it always does. The forge cools, the embers die down, and the silence of the workshop settles around you. But in the quiet, there's a strange sense of fulfillment, a sense of accomplishment. The task may be constant, the labor unending, but for today, you've done your part. You've contributed to the world, even if that contribution is never truly seen. The work is its own reward. Historians still argue whether the satisfaction of blacksmithing came from the act of creation or from the realization that the blacksmith's work was indispensable to the community. Some suggest that the satisfaction came from knowing their work was valued by others, while others believe that it came from the very process of shaping metal. Either way, the blacksmith's craft was not just about creating tools and weapons, it was about creating a connection to something greater as you leave the forge for the night. The chill of the outside air greets you, but the warmth of the work stays with you, embedded in your muscles, in your bones. You'll carry the weight of the forge with you until the next time you step back inside, ready to start again. For now, you can rest. Tomorrow will bring more of the same, but that's the life you've chosen. The hammer will fall again, the fire will burn again, and the world will continue to turn, powered by the work you do. Historians still debate whether blacksmithing was ever truly a profession of choice or if it was a necessity born from the need for survival. Some suggest that blacksmiths found a sense of purpose in the craft, while others believe that it was simply a way to ensure that the basic needs of society were met. Either way, the blacksmith's role in medieval society remains essential, and the craft itself is one of resilience and endurance qualities that defined not just the work, but the person who carried it out.